All right, all right, all right. Good evening, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. My name is Rob Sogomonian. I am running the 24 Days of Christmas. We are on day 15. So we've been reading basically a Christmas story, or at least a portion of a Christmas story every night for the past 15 days. We're going until the night before Christmas, at which point I will read the night before Christmas. A little fitting there, don't you think? We started with a Christmas Carol. We moved on to the Gift of the Magi, and we are currently going through the Life and Adventures of Santa Claus, which is probably the most adorable Christmas story I've ever read or heard or anything. I absolutely love this story. It is super, super cute. We are a couple of chapters into kind of the midpoint of the book, the middle chapters of the book, called Manhood, I believe. If you have missed and want to catch up on any of the previous stories or the previous chapters of this book that we're currently in, I do have a playlist here on YouTube. I do kind of see YouTube as the source of truth, if you will. The video quality tends to be the best. The audio quality tends to be the best. And so it also has a really nice way of kind of tracking playlists and organizing everything together. So if you're interested, playlist is over here. As I'm reading, you will be seeing the book up as I'm reading through it. That way you guys can follow along if you're that type of person who likes to read along with your audiobooks. And every so often, I may or may not, because sometimes I forget, pop up a couple of QR codes, and these are basically just donation buttons. So if you're enjoying the stories, if you like what I'm doing here, if you want to maybe motivate me to turn these into actual audiobooks that you and your kids can listen to for years and years to come, you got a couple of links here. The first one is my Venmo. You can just Venmo me directly. I just say buy me a coffee. Like $5 is cool. And then the other one is literally called Coffee. It's made for buying creators' coffees. Not required. Whether you do or not, I'm still going to continue reading these until the 24th. But it's always appreciated. So in any case, what else do I have to talk about? Oh, tonight I'm going live on LinkedIn for the first time, I think. And it might be vertical video, portrait style instead of landscape. If it is and it sucks, I'm sorry. It's the first time I'm trying anything on LinkedIn, so we'll see how that goes. It might not even be working, and I might just be talking to nobody right now, which is fine. But we'll see how that goes, and we'll see if I need to adjust it in the future. Looks like Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube are going strong, so that's good. And what else we got here? We got TikTok, we got LinkedIn. Those should both be working as well. And interestingly enough, the YouTube page is not updating. Let me see if I update that, if it does anything. YouTube does not seem to think that I am connected. Nope, there we go. Okay, cool. Good. Everything's just lagging a little bit. Understandable. I got a lot going on. All right. I guess without further ado, we can get into Chapter 3 of the middle section of the Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. I'm still kind of getting over a little bit of a cold, so I might cough a little bit, clear my throat. I've got my throat coat tea here, which is lovely and delicious and does help quite a bit with keeping everything lubricated, as it were. But let's get started. Chapter 3. How the Ryles Colored the Toys. A hush lay on the Laughing Valley now. Snow covered it like a white spread, and pillows of downy flakes drifted before the dwelling where Claus sat feeding the blaze of the fire. The brook gurgled on beneath a heavy sheet of ice, and all living plants and insects nestled close to Mother Earth to keep warm. The face of the moon was hid by dark clouds, and the wind, delighting in the wintry sport, pushed and whirled the snowflakes in so many directions that they could get no chance to fall to the ground. Claus heard the wind whistling and shrieking in its play, and thanked the good Nooks again for his comfortable shelter. Blinky washed her face lazily and stared at the coals with a look of perfect content. The toy cat sat opposite the real one and gazed straight ahead, as toy cats should. Suddenly, Claus heard a noise that sounded different from the voice of the wind. It was more like a wail of suffering and despair. He stood up and listened, but the wind, growing boisterous, shook the door and rattled the windows to distract his attention. He waited until the wind was tired, and then, still listening, he heard once more the shrill cry of distress. Quickly, he drew on his coat, pulled his cap over his eyes, and opened the door. The wind dashed in and scattered the embers over the hearth, at the same time blowing Blinky's fur so furiously that she crept under the table to escape. Then the door was closed, and Claus was outside, peering anxiously into the darkness. The wind laughed and scolded and tried to push him over, but he stood firm. The helpless flakes stumbled against his eyes and dimmed his sight, but he rubbed them away and looked again. Snow was everywhere, white and glittering. It covered the earth and filled the air. The cry was not repeated. Claus turned to go back into the house, but the wind caught him unawares, and he stumbled and fell across a snowdrift. His hand plunged into the drift and touched something that was not snow. This he seized, and pulling it gently toward him, found it to be a child. The next moment he had lifted it in his arms and carried it into the house. The wind followed him through the door, but Claus shut it out quickly. He laid the rescued child on the hearth, and brushing away the snow, he discovered it to be Weekum, a little boy who lived in a house beyond the valley. Claus wrapped a warm blanket around the little one and rubbed the frost from its limbs. Before long, the child opened his eyes and, seeing where he was, smiled happily. Then Claus warmed milk and fed it to the boy slowly, while the cat looked on with sober curiosity. Finally, the little one curled up in his friend's arms and sighed and fell asleep, and Claus, filled with gladness that he had found the wanderer, held him closely while he slumbered. The wind, finding no more mischief to do, climbed the hill and swept on toward the north. This gave the weary snowflakes time to settle down to earth, and the valley became still again. The boy, having slept well in the arms of his friend, opened his eyes and sat up. Then, as a child will, he looked around the room and saw all that it contained. "Your cat is a nice cat, Claus," he said at last. "Let me hold it." But Puss objected and ran away. "The other cat won't run, Claus," continued the boy. "Let me hold that one." Claus placed the toy in his arms, and the boy held it lovingly and kissed the tip of its wooden ear. "How did you get lost in the storm, Weekum?" asked Claus. "I started to walk to my auntie's house and lost my way," answered Weekum. "Were you frightened?" "It was cold," said Weekum, "and the snow got in my eyes so I could not see. Then I kept on till I fell in the snow without knowing where I was, and the wind blew the flakes over me and covered me up." Claus gently stroked his head, and the boy looked up at him and smiled. "I'm all right now," said Weekum. "Yes," replied Claus happily. "Now I will put you in my warm bed, and you must sleep until morning, when I will carry you back to your mother." "May the cat sleep with me?" asked the boy. "Yes, if you wish it to," answered Claus. "It's a nice cat," Weekum said, smiling, as Claus tucked the blankets around him, and presently the little one fell asleep with the wooden toy in his arms. When morning came, the sun claimed the Laughing Valley and flooded it with his rays, so Claus prepared to take the lost child back to its mother. "May I keep the cat, Claus?" asked Weekum. "It's nicer than real cats. It doesn't run away, or scratch, or bite. May I keep it?" "Yes, indeed," answered Claus, pleased that the toy he had made could give pleasure to the child. So he wrapped the boy and the wooden cat in a warm cloak, perching the bundle upon his own broad shoulders, and then he tramped through the snow and the drifts of the valley and across the plain beyond to the poor cottage where Weekum's mother lived. "See, Mama," cried the boy as soon as they entered. "I've got a cat." The good woman wept tears of joy over the rescue of her darling and thanked Claus many times for his kind act. So he carried a warm and happy heart back to his home in the valley. That night he said to Puss, I believe the children will love the wooden cats almost as well as the real ones, and they can't hurt them by pulling their tails and ears. I'll make another." So this was the beginning of his great work. The next cat was better made than the first. While Claus sat whittling it out, the yellow Ryle came in to make him a visit, and so pleased was he with the man's skill that he ran away and brought several of his fellows. There sat the red Ryle, the black Ryle, the green Ryle, the blue Ryle, and the yellow Ryle in a circle on the floor, while Claus whittled and whistled, and the wooden cat grew into shape. "If it could be made the same color as the real cat, no one would know the difference," said the yellow Ryle, thoughtfully. "The little ones, maybe, would not know the difference," replied Claus, pleased with the idea.
"I will bring you some of the red that I color my roses and tulips with,"
cried the red Ryle,
"and then you can make the cat's lips and tongue red."
"I will bring some of the green that I color my grasses and leaves with," said the green Ryle, "and then you can color the cat's eyes green." "They will need a bit of yellow also," remarked the yellow Ryle. "I must fetch some of the yellow that I use to color my buttercups and goldenrods with." "The real cat is black," said the black Ryle. "I will bring some of the black that I use to color the eyes of my pansies with, and then you can paint your wooden cat black." "I see you have a blue ribbon around Blinky's neck," added the blue Ryle. "I will get some of the color that I use to paint the bluebells and forget-me-nots with, and then you can carve a wooden ribbon on the toy cat's neck and paint it blue." So the Ryles disappeared, and by the time Claus had finished carving out the form of the cat, they were all back with the paints and brushes. They made Blinky sit upon the table that Claus might paint the toy cat just the right color, and when the work was done, the Ryles declared it was exactly as good as a live cat.
"That is to all appearances,"
added the red Ryle. Blinky seemed a little offended by the attention bestowed upon the toy, and that she might not seem to approve the imitation cat, she walked to the corner of the hearth and sat down with a dignified air. But Claus was delighted, and as soon as morning came, he started out and tramped through the snow across the valley and the plain until he came to a village. There, in a poor hut near the walls of the beautiful palace of the Lord of Lurd, a little girl lay upon a wretched cot, moaning with pain. Claus approached the child and kissed her and comforted her, and then he drew the toy cat from beneath his coat where he had hidden it, and placed it in her arms. Ah, how well he felt himself repaid for his labor in his long walk when he saw the little one's eyes grow bright with pleasure. She hugged the kitty tight to her breast as if it had been a precious gem and would not let it go for a single moment. The fever was quieted, the pain grew less, and she fell into a sweet and refreshing sleep. Claus laughed and whistled and sang all the way home. Never had he been so happy as on that day. When he entered his house, he found Shigra, the lioness, awaiting him. Since his babyhood, Shigra had loved Claus, and while he dwelt in the forest, she had often come to visit him at Nasiel's bower. After Claus had gone to live in the Laughing Valley, Shigra became lonely and ill at ease, and now she had braved the snow drifts which all lions abhor, to see him once more. Shigra was getting old, and her teeth were beginning to fall out, while the hairs that tipped her ears and tail had changed from tawny yellow to white. Claus found her lying on his hearth, and he put his arms around the neck of the lioness and hugged her lovingly. The cat had retired into a far corner. She did not care to associate with Shigra. Claus told his old friend about the cats he had made, and how much pleasure they had given Weekum and the sick girl. Shigra did not know much about children indeed. If she met a child, she could scarcely be trusted not to devour it. But she was interested in Klaus's new labors, and said,
"These images seem to me very attractive, yet I cannot see why you would make cats, which are very unimportant animals. Suppose, now that I am here, you make the image of a lioness, the queen of all beasts. Then indeed your children will be happy and safe at the same time." Claus thought this was a good suggestion.
So he got a piece of wood and sharpened his knife, while Shigra crouched upon the hearth at his feet. With much care he carved the head in the likeness of the lioness, even to the two fierce teeth that curved over her lower lip, and the deep, frowning lines above her wide-open eyes. When it was finished, he said, "You have a terrible look, Shigra." "Then the image is like me," she answered, "for I am indeed terrible to all who are not my friends." Claus now carved out the body, with Shigra's long tail trailing behind it. The image of the crouching lioness was very lifelike. "It pleases me," said Shigra, yawning and stretching her body gracefully. "Now I will watch while you paint." He brought the paints the Ryls had given him from the cupboard and colored the image to resemble the real Shigra. The lioness placed her big padded paws upon the edge of the table and raised herself while she carefully examined the toy that was her likeness. "You are indeed skillful," she said proudly. "The children will like that better than cats, I'm sure." Then, snarling at Blinky, who arched her back in terror and whined fearfully, she walked away toward her forest home with stately strides. Chapter 4. How Little Mary Became Frightened. The winter was over now, and all the Laughing Valley was filled with joyous excitement. The brook was so happy at being free once again that it gurgled more boisterously than ever and dashed so recklessly against the rocks that it sent showers of spray high in the air. The grass thrust its sharp little blades upwards through the mat of dead stalks where it had hidden from the snow, but the flowers were yet too timid to show themselves, although the Ryls were busy feeding their roots. The sun was in remarkably good humor and sent his rays dancing merrily throughout the valley. Claus was eating his dinner one day when he heard a timid knock on his door. "Come in," he called. No one entered, but after a pause came another rapping. Claus jumped up and threw open the door. Before him stood a small girl holding a smaller brother fast by the hand. "Is you Claus?" she asked shyly. "Indeed I am, my dear," he answered with a laugh as he caught both children in his arms and kissed them. "You are very welcome, and you have come just in time to share my dinner." He took them to the table and fed them with fresh milk and nut cakes. When they had eaten enough, he asked, "Why have you made this long journey to see me?" "I wants a tat," replied little Mary, and her brother, who had not yet learned to speak many words, nodded his head and exclaimed like an echo, "Tat!" "Oh, you want my toy cats, do you?" returned Claus, greatly pleased to discover that his creations were so popular with children. The little visitors nodded eagerly. "Unfortunately," he continued, "I have but one cat now ready, for I carried two to children in the town yesterday, and the one I have shall be given to your brother, Mary, because he is the smaller, and the next one I make shall be for you." The boy's face was bright with smiles as he took the precious toy Claus held out to him, but little Mary covered her face with her arm and began to sob grievously. "I wants a tat now," she wailed. Her disappointment made Claus feel miserable for a moment. Then he suddenly remembered Shigra. "Don't cry, darling," he said soothingly. "I have a toy much nicer than a cat, and you shall have that." He went to the cupboard and drew out the image of the lioness, which he placed on the table before Mary. The girl raised her arm and gave one glance at the fierce teeth and glaring eyes of the beast, and then, uttering a terrified scream, she rushed from the house. The boy followed her, also screaming lustily and even dropping his precious cat in his fear. For a moment, Claus stood motionless, being puzzled and astonished. Then he threw Shigra's image into the cupboard and ran after the children, calling to them not to be frightened. Little Mary stopped in her flight, and her brother clung to her skirt, but they both cast fearful glances at the house until Claus had assured them many times that the beast had been locked in the cupboard. "Yet why were you frightened at seeing it?" he asked. "It is only a toy to play with."
"It's bad," said Mary decidedly, and just horrid, and not a bit nice like cats."
"Perhaps you are right," returned Claus thoughtfully. "But if you will return with me to the house, I will soon make you a pretty cat." So they timidly entered the house again, having faith in their friend's words, and afterward they had the joy of watching Claus carve out a cat from a bit of wood and paint it in natural colors. It did not take him long to do this, for he had become skillful with his knife by this time, and Mary loved her toy the more dearly because she had seen it made. After his little visitors had trotted away on their journey homeward, Claus sat long in deep thought. And he then decided that such fierce creatures as his friend the lioness would never do as models from which to fashion his toys. "There must be nothing to frighten the dear babies," he reflected, "and while I know Shigro well, I am not afraid of her. It is but natural that children should look upon her image with terror. Hereafter I will choose such mild-mannered animals as squirrels and rabbits and deer and lambkins from which to carve my toys, and then then the little ones will love rather than fear them." He began his work that very day, and before bedtime had made a wooden rabbit and a lamb. They were not quite so lifelike as the cats had been, because they were formed from memory, while Blinky had sat very still for Claus to look at while he worked. But the new toys pleased the children nevertheless, and the fame of Klaus's playthings quickly spread to every cottage on plain and in village. He always carried his gifts to the sick or crippled children, but those who were strong enough walked to the house in the valley to ask for them, so a little path was soon worn from the plain to the door of the toymaker's cottage. First came the children who had been playmates of Claus before he began to make toys. These, you may be sure, were well supplied. Then children who lived farther away heard of the wonderful images and made journeys to the valley to secure them. All little ones were welcome, and never a one went away empty-handed. This demand for his handiwork kept Claus busily occupied, but he was quite happy in knowing the pleasure he gave to so many of the dear children. His friends, the immortals, were pleased with his success and supported him bravely. The Knooks selected for him clear pieces of soft wood that his knife might not be blunted in cutting them. The Ryls kept him supplied with paints of all colors and brushes fashioned from the tips of timothy grasses. The fairies discovered that the workmen needed saws and chisels and hammers and nails as well as knives, and brought him a goodly array of such tools. Claus soon turned his living room into a most wonderful workshop. He built a bench before the window and arranged his tools and paints so that he could reach everything as he sat on his stool. And as he finished toy after toy to delight the hearts of little children, he found himself growing so gay and happy that he could not refrain from singing and laughing and whistling all the day long. "It's because I live in the Laughing Valley, where everything else laughs," said Claus. But that was not the reason. All right, we've gotten through 2 chapters tonight. I believe that's where we are going to wrap up for the evening. Tomorrow night, day 16 of the 24 days of Christmas, we will continue with chapter 5, how Bessie Blithesome came to the Laughing Valley. So I'm cold reading this book. I've not read this before. I'm discovering all of this along with you as I'm reading through it. I love this book. I'm not gonna lie. I think this is probably one of the best Christmas stories that I've ever been experienced. I'm loving it. This is taking me back to the same kind of feelings that I had when I watched Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer for the first time. You know, the stop motion animation one, which is still probably one of my favorite children's Christmas movies. I love that movie. I watch it every year. That's one of my favorites. My favorite Christmas movie of all time is It's a Wonderful Life, for reasons that we're not going to discuss on this podcast. Maybe we'll do a therapy podcast at some point, but that's my favorite Christmas movie. But it's also tied with Miracle on 34th Street. both movies that are from my childhood, and the old one, not the one with not the newer one. I am a huge fan of the old one, the one that was in black and white. I think there's a colorized version of it, but I like to watch the black and white one because it's just amazing. Hey, Chris, good to see you, man. Have a Merry Christmas yourself. But those are kind of my favorite Christmas movies. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, It's a Wonderful Life, Miracle on 34th Street. And when I first saw the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I had, like that whole magic feeling. Like, this is really cool. I was totally invested in the story. This book I am completely invested in. I love this story. It's the first time I read it, and I'm getting that feeling of I don't even know how to explain it. When you experience something for the first time and you're just like super giddy about it because it's so cool, that's what I'm getting from this book. So I'm really, really enjoying this. And again, it was written by the same author that did The Wizard of Oz. Oz, Frank Baum. So L. Frank Baum is the author of The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. He did a really good job with this, so I'm very much enjoying it. Again, if you enjoyed this reading, if you want to buy me a coffee, there's a couple of links over here. One to just Venmo me a couple bucks, one to do a coffee donation is the same thing. It's basically the same thing. They just go to two different accounts. And then if you want to go back and listen to any of the previous audiobook chapters that we've done. Again, we've done A Christmas Carol. We've done The Gift of the Magi. I did an audiobook demonstration. So there's actually an episode in there where if I were producing this into an audiobook, what would I do? So you can go and watch that one if you'd like. And, of course, the previous chapters of this book, The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. And there's the link, or there's the QR code if you want to go and watch any of those previous chapters. That's all I got for tonight. Chapter 15, or the night 15 is done as we get into the final 10 days before Christmas. We're going to start chapter 16, or we're going to start day 16 tomorrow, chapter 5 of The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus. So have a great night, everybody. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah. I think that started yesterday. And then any other seasonal greetings to anybody who does not celebrate any of those. I myself am not religious, so all my blessings to you in whatever fashion that may be. Have a great night and have a great holiday season. See you tomorrow.